All right, are we ready for the last morning session? Yeah. Brian, are you ready? A little bit. If you were going out on the waves, you just don't say, I'm a little bit ready. Yeah, totally ready. Great. Ezra, can I ask you to pray for us going into this session?
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Cool. Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you that we get to be here in class right now. This is our last Friday here in this classroom, so I just pray that we can give it our all, focus up, pay attention for what we have to learn today. I just pray as we are learning new things about a lot of different topics and maybe some hard topics that we wrote down on the board yesterday. I pray that we can just really be in touch with it and really be focused up. And I just thank you for this day, and I just pray that we have a great rest of our week. And in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ezra. So yesterday you put this on the board. These were the different ethical issues. I teach applied ethics and various kinds of ethics, mainly at the school that I teach, which is a Pacific University. So war, that was on there. That's usually a perennial one that happens all the time. Usually every semester people put that up. What do you guys mean by live your own truth?
Like, you're your own God. You get to pick what you do.
You're the
I think.
sole decider of everything in your life, right? Yeah. That can also like bleed into what's called relativism. Everything that's moral, I decide based on my feelings, my desires, my internal state. Hookup culture. We're gonna skip that one. No, just kidding. Gender identity was the biggest one. Talk to me. Why do you think that one's such a big deal?
Such a problem. Yeah.
Can you say more about that or no?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just think in our current culture, gender identity is becoming an even more controversial topic, and it's getting pushed so much, especially in schools with young kids, and it's becoming something that almost like abortion, it's becoming a form of what's the word? Abuse to kids. And just one of the biggest lies right now. And I don't know. I know I'm really passionate about it. I'm sure a lot of people here are passionate about it.
Where I work with mainly PhDs, medical doctors, and that are in the STEM fields. We just produced. I can't give it to you right now, but we just produced a 300-page research document on that very issue. And if you want to, or if you want to, I'll put up my email on the next section. But I can send you. You won't read the 300-page document. I helped oversee the team that did it, but I can send you the summary documents that these medical doctors, philosophers, theologians produced on this subject. And I think you would find it incredibly enlightening. We're going to release it in June. It's technically Pride Month, and we're releasing it kind of right in that controversial time space. And it's really, really helpful because they do a deep dive into the literature, the studies that people are using to push that ideology, and they sort of uncover some of the problems with the studies that I think you would find very enlightening. I wish I could share it right here today, but I'm bound by some ethical issues that I can't share it yet. But I could share it with you guys. Actually, you'd be one of the first to see it. So I'll put up my email. If you want to see that document, I'll send it to you. Abortion is a perennial issue, and that's the issue I'm going to talk about today. So just a little bit of a big picture. I'm going to talk about the issue of abortion, and feel free to stop me, ask questions as we walk through it. I think it's one of the primary issues that happen. I mean, it's just every semester it comes up. For various reasons, which I'll talk about. But it's something, if you get good at thinking about this ethical issue, you can deal with most other issues as well that are on the board here. Is that the Super Bowl ad you're talking about? The He Gets Us campaign?
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that?
I just found it interesting and wondered what you thought about it.
Yeah, I actually know one of the advisors on the campaign. And their goal their stated goal is to get conversations happening. So, did you think it was controversial?
Yeah.
Yeah. How can you tell me how?
I just saw a lot of people complaining about it.
Complain? Like, yeah, how were they complaining? Like,
They're just like, I don't know. Just like Jesus wouldn't wash gay people's feet. Or
he
something.
what?
He wouldn't wash gay people's feet or something. I don't know. That's just what I saw. So.
Yeah, yeah. There was quite a bit of controversy over it on the Super Bowl ad, especially him and Jesus washing feet. I think it was in front of an abortion clinic, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there was one in front of an abortion clinic, and then there was the priest with the pride.
Right. Yeah, that whole campaign is not meant to push an agenda. According to the people I've talked to who are a part of it, it's meant to get conversations started. And whether you agree with it or not, that's part of their point. It was after it was the more people Googled Jesus after that Super Bowl ad than they did during Christmas. It was very interesting. So people were really stirred up about it. Medical assisted suicide, also called euthanasia, is an issue, and divorce. Yeah. Anything missing for you up there? It's interesting that no one talked about AI as a primary issue. That's a big one right now. I know a lot of people in the entertainment industry, and they have essentially lost their jobs because of AI and various reasons why that is the case. But that's one of the big issues. Also, data collection from your phone is a huge issue coming up that you probably may not know about. I teach data ethics at the college, and that's a big thing that's starting to rise, especially medical data, which people sell. So there's a lot of different ethical issues that we can talk about. What I'll do is I'm going to talk about the abortion issue, help you find some ways to think about it, and then if you want to ask any questions on any of these topics, I'm more than happy to take questions on it, because I walk through all of these in my classes. So real quick, everyone has an imagination. It's a God-given gift for us to do thought experiments in our mind, so we don't have to do them in the real world to some degree. So I want to take you through a thought experiment with your imagination, your moral imagination. You ever heard the term "your happy place"? Oh, bless you. What's your happy place? Is it Kauai? No? From Alaska? What would your happy place be, Dana? Outside, on the beach, in the mountains? Boat. Okay, boat, yeah. So maybe, this is a picture of Italy. I've been to Italy. Beautiful Tuscany with the different colored houses, the wineries, all sorts of things. It might be up in the mountains. Your happy place may be at the beach, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes with me, right? I won't do anything weird. So close your eyes, and I want you to pretend that you're in your happy place and you're looking out the window. And whether you see ocean, trees, hills, mountains, you're sitting there, and what you're doing is you're washing dishes. And just picture yourself. You do this at the Anchor House. You're washing dishes, and you're looking outside, and you don't care that you're washing dishes because you have this beautiful view. You can smell the trees or maybe the ocean, and you're just happy. And then all of a sudden, you hear a door creak behind you. It opens up, and in walks your child. And your child says to you, you're washing dishes, you're looking out, you're in your happy place, and your child says, "Can I play with this?" What do you say? What is it? It's the neighbor's cat. Yes? Yeah, sure. It's a tarantula. No. Yes. All right. You're sitting there, you're washing dishes. Just imagine it. You're looking out the window. You're in your happy place. Your child walks in the door and they say, "Can I eat this?" What do you say? What is it? It is a goldfishy. The cracker kind. Sure, go ahead. It's a pill bug. Yes or no? No? It's a lizard.
Heck no.
The guys are like, go ahead. All right. You're washing dishes. Just stay there. It's your happy place. You're looking out the window. And your child walks in. And they say, "Mommy, Daddy, can I kill this?"
No.
Open your eyes. Can I kill this? What do you say? Say it louder.
What is it?
Yeah, you ask the question, what is it? So let's say it's a pill bug. You know what a pill bug is? Do they have it? Roly-poly? Yeah. What do you say? Huh? What? I can't hear you. I'm a drummer. I can't hear.
Kid should kill it because the kid probably get hurt.
Smashing a pill bug?
Oh, centipede?
No, a pill bug.
Oh, I thought someone said centipede.
No. Okay, let's say it's a centipede. Can I kill this?
Yes.
Yes. It's a spider. Yeah, sure, go ahead. It's the neighbor's cat.
No. Heck no.
Why not?
Heck.
Belongs to somebody.
Because what?
It belongs to somebody.
It belongs to somebody. Who says you can kill the cat? Yeah, Cruz. He's in. You know, they actually did a survey in the 50s on whether or not, what it would take, how much money it would take for you to do certain things. And to kill a cat, everyone said $10,000. They would do it. Some people said $5. No problem, right? What if the kid walks in and says, "Can I kill this?" And it's their baby brother or sister.
If your kid's asking that, there's a problem with you.
Right. What we say is no, and we're calling the psychologist right away. Right? That's a problem. But notice you guys hit on it really, really well. You have to ask what question first. What is it? Can I play with this? Can I eat this? Can I kill this? It really ramps it up on those three questions. And you have to ask, well, what is it? That, my friends, is the primary question when it comes to the abortion debate. You have to answer this question. Well, what is it? Now, we might think, why talk about this issue? Well, it comes up regularly. I think it's just part of the human condition. But let me give you 4 reasons that why we're going to talk about this. One is that it's core to our lives. Whether you are a woman or a man, it's one of the most clarifying issues that we can discuss. In fact, right now in America, this arguably, according to surveys, is the main question that will decide who becomes president. Which is very, very interesting because it used to be maybe the economy or something else, maybe sometimes war. But this seems to be, according to surveys at least, probably the main issue that is dividing people.
More than gender?
More than gender. It's a core issue, all right? Now, these are some of the most important questions we can ask on this issue. For instance, what is the unborn entity? Notice I put unborn entity, not to beg any questions. I'm open to saying, let's clarify. Remember, what was the phrase I used early on? I prefer clarity over agreement. So let's just get clear first before I try to persuade you one way or another. So not only what is the unborn entity, but what makes human beings valuable is going to be a core issue. Right? What makes human beings valuable? And this actually divides people because some people will say what makes human beings valuable is how they function. Whether or not you can function well. Whereas the Judeo-Christian tradition says it depends upon that you're made in the image of God. There's a big difference. One is about essence, your nature. The other is about how you function. Okay. Another core question is, well, what are our duties towards human beings? Someone asked, living your own truth. When you take that posture, you're not asking what are my duties, but this is a core question for a core ethical question, I would say. Also, a lot of times we talk about women's rights, but if the woman is pregnant, they're a mother. But we want to. But what you see in culture is we remove that title in order to make different decisions about the issue, and I'm going to try to demonstrate that for you. Right. So all of these are really core questions. That's why we need to talk about this issue, and it actually impacts all the other ethical issues, by the way. So go to dictionary.com, and this is the definition of abortion, right? Ezra, can you read that out loud? Just the first one for me. Can you read it out loud?
The number one?
Yeah, number one, please.
Also called a voluntary abortion, the removal of an embryo or fetus in the uterus in order to end the pregnancy.
Is there anything interesting about that definition to you that you would highlight? As a philosopher, I do this for a living, so it like jumps out at me. But that doesn't mean it jumps out at you. Yeah, tell me.
I just always think it's interesting when people say fetus, because that's just like, it's Latin for like child, or like it means child, and when people are like, don't call it a child, call it a fetus, I don't know, it drives me crazy, because like people are so uneducated that they don't know that fetus is just Latin for child, and I'm like, how?
Yeah.
I don't know, sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's actually a really good observation. I'm impressed. How did you know that it was Latin for a stage of development?
I grew up doing Latin, so.
You did. Very nice. Very good. Yeah.
Also the word voluntary.
Mm-hmm. What jumps out at you about that?
Because I would say, for the most part, the kind of abortion that we're referring to is all voluntary. Like, the medical procedures in which, like, they have to remove a baby during PAPS or it's stillborn, those aren't abortions.
Right.
And, like, trying to save the mother and the child, that's not an abortion. If a baby happens to die, or that's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, I've heard people call, like, miscarriages, like, well, what's the difference between that and a
Yeah.
miscarriage? And that's, like, just, like, such an awful thing to say,
Mm.
to, like equivocate.
Yeah. Do you notice one of the other definitions up there?
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably saw it.
Yeah.
Also called spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. Why call a miscarriage an abortion? Right. So do you guys ever use dictionary.com?
No.
You don't look up definitions. Huh?
My English teacher liked it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, thousands upon millions of people use it. And if you look up the definition of abortion, this is what you get. But you're pointing out some really important issues here. And these are key. How about the term removal? Right. I'm going to remove some furniture from my room. I'm going to remove the car from the garage. That seems rather innocuous, doesn't it? So removal is a very kind of ambiguous term. It's interesting that it's used here. You already pointed out the issues of embryo and fetus. Right now what happens, and I've done surveys on this with students, fetus is used as an ambiguous term so that when you hear it now, you don't think stage of development, you just think this thing over there. It's ambiguous. But you are exactly right. Embryo, fetus, newborn, toddler, child, teenager, adult, those are all stages of development. The actual thing, the entity itself, in its essence, doesn't change. But we go through stages of development, right? Also notice this. What does it mean to end something? You're going to end your semester. Okay, I might end my job. If I walked over to Ezra and I said, I'm going to end you. Then you're thinking, whoa, what's going on here, right? End, that's an interesting term. Because what does end mean in abortion?
Death.
Yeah, something's dying, right? But notice here, it's ambiguous. What does end mean? End the semester, end the job, end you, end the life? Interesting it doesn't say that. The issue of abortion is not just core to who we are, but it's also very, very current. How many of you know or have read anything about the Dobbs decision? Does anyone know about it? Yeah? Talk to me.
That's when abortion went to the Supreme Court, correct?
Yeah?
And it became legal, and then they did it again. They went back to court, and they removed it from the federal law.
Good distinction. So Roe v. Wade in 1973 made abortion legal, and what was introduced at that time was this idea of trimesters. Okay? And Justice Blackmun at the time said that the unborn entity goes through these different stages, and as it matures, I'm trying to remember his language, but it's endowed with more rights as it matures. Then in the 90s, there was another decision, it's called the Casey decision, to where it made abortion legal through all 9 months of the pregnancy. And you also had something which was called partial birth abortion. So this was up for debate in the 90s, and what shifted people's views on abortion at that time, the 90s moving into the 2000s, was in Congress they were debating the issue. And I don't know how much you know about partial birth abortion. I'm not trying to be sensational. But what they do is in the second or third trimester, they partially birth the baby, but usually the head is still in the canal. And then they put an instrument, and usually, again, I'm sorry for using this language, but they crush the skull or suck out the brains. And then after it dies, they remove the rest of the baby. So this was so disturbing for people when they were viewing even pictures. They were drawings. They weren't live pictures, but they were drawings. People had, understandably, a visceral reaction to it. And there became an uptick in people moving more towards a pro-life position. Now that has shifted in your lifetime. Right now, I'm going to show you some of the statistics, but that view has shifted a bit. Oh, just a quick side note. The Supreme Court is considered what? The highest court, right, in our land. And you were right, actually, Maria. In the Dobbs decision, what they did was they didn't take away people's rights. They moved the decision of abortion to the states, right? So a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, they took away women's rights. That actually is completely true. What they did is they just removed the decision to make different states decide. So in California where I live is a very, very pro-abortion state, where they're even incentivizing women to come to California, and they will pay for your abortion. Right. So, I don't know if you know this. I was in D.C. not too long ago, but there's actually a higher court than the Supreme Court. Does anyone know what it is? It's a basketball court. In the top, above the chambers of the Supreme Court, is actually a basketball court. where you can play basketball. It's amazing. I can just picture the justices, taking off their robes and shooting some hoops, doing some slam dunks on one another. I just think that's cool. This is a very what?
That's so cool.
It is kind of cool. That's why I put it in. This is a very common issue. Take various movies. Dirty Dancing, a very famous movie back in the 80s, deals with the issue of abortion. Take the movie The Cider House Rules, if you want. This is about an older doctor teaching a younger doctor, and it centers around the issue of abortion and an orphanage. The movie Juno is about a crisis pregnancy. It's a comedy, but it deals with some really, really heavy issues. How many of you have seen the movie or heard of Unplanned? Yeah, what do you know?
That I think her name's Abby.
Mhm.
Put out a true story about this girl. She used to work for Planned Parenthood, and she was like one of the. I want to say she was one of like the heads. Like she had a really good position, and she had never seen an abortion like full
Yep.
on happening. And then she witnessed one as she had to be in the room and witness one and realized like that they were actually killing children. And then she just changed her ways, got out of that, and then I think she has an organization where she fights against Planned Parenthood, and they went to court and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a great summary. She was called in to view or help the doctor at a clinic, and after she saw it, she literally walked out. Right? She was working. She was a clinic operator, and she had no idea what was actually going on in the clinic. It's pretty wild. How many of you have heard of Gosnell? Just so I've heard. Can I ask you, what do you know?
I don't know much about it.
Okay, but you heard the name.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that none of you have heard about Gosnell? He is arguably, according to the court documents, he's killed he's the I can't say most famous, but he's the highest serial killer ever in America. He was an abortion doctor, and he ran a clinic where he operated on women and ended up killing numerous of them and also killing newborn infants. And this went to trial, and he was convicted of multiple murders. But it's interesting that you don't know that he's the top serial killer in the United States, right? Why don't we know that? Why is that, right? It's actually, the press didn't even take up the issue. It's a very, very interesting movie. There's an article about hip hop and abortion. And it walks you through all the different songs about hip hop artists and how they write about the abortion issue. It's a really, really interesting article. And it's amazing actually how many hip hop artists are actually pro-life at the end of the day. And to read their lyrics are very, very impactful. I say it's a common issue. Just you can view here, in 2014 we had the most data there, that's why it's the date. About 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by age 45, okay? More than half of all U.S. abortion patients were in their 20s, okay? Adolescents make up about 12% of abortions. It's interesting that in California, you can be an adolescent and get an abortion without your parents' permission or even notification. Okay. What's also interesting about this is 17% of abortion patients in 2014 identified themselves as mainline Protestants. It's a pretty high percentage. 13% evangelical Protestants. 24% Catholics. The Catholic Church is one of the most pro-life institutions there is, yet what you see here is that 24% of people who get abortions are Catholic. 38% reported no religious affiliation. So this is a very, very common issue. Whenever I speak about it at a church, in a classroom, I was just in Texas speaking to a high school about this issue, I have to recognize and be sensitive that it's likely someone in the room has either experienced an abortion or has known someone who has. So we want to be very sensitive when talking about it. Finally, we have to talk about this because it's part of our calling. I think there's some interesting biblical support for this. Take this verse from Isaiah. Learn to do what is right, promote justice, give the oppressed reason to celebrate, take up the cause of the orphan, defend the rights of the widow. Right? Do also unborn children fit into that category? That's the question. As a Christian, I would say yes. One of the things I love about this verse is notice it says at the very beginning what? It says, learn. Right? It's a process. I want to be patient with people. You think about the movie Unplanned, she didn't know. I mean, she was operating a clinic and didn't really realize what was going on. Once she learned what was going on, that her moral conscience really moved her. Right? Now, these are hard verses, but we have to recognize that they're part of the biblical record. You who love the Lord, you have to hate evil. Right? It doesn't say hate the person, but you have to hate evil. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. I was in Berkeley attending a conference in California, and it was interesting. It had on the window, this is a hate-free zone. This is a hate-free zone. And I understand what they're getting at. We don't want to hate people. In fact, as a Christian, we have a motivation from Jesus that says we're to love our enemy, right? But that doesn't mean that we should remain passive about actions that harm people, right? It was Christians that helped lead the charge against slavery years ago. So let me ask this question. Is it ever justified? This is a question that you can ask anybody, and it just gets the conversation going without being, putting someone on the defensive. So is it ever justified to take the life of the unborn entity? And there are basically 4 answers to this question, right? And it's very easy to memorize, and I actually think to understand. So there is a pro-life position that answers this question. It's never appropriate to take the life of the unborn. Right? Now, this actually is a very, very small minority in the pro-life community. And usually, you should know this, what happens is when the media takes up this issue, they hyper-focus, if they talk about pro-life, they hyper-focus on this issue. Because when do you think, you already mentioned it, I think, when is it appropriate or might be morally justified to end the life of the unborn? Yeah.
Like if it could potentially kill the mother or both?
Yeah, so in the case of ectopic pregnancies or tubal pregnancies, the embryo gets lodged in the fallopian tubes of the mother, and if it's allowed to grow, the embryo will die, and also the mother will die. So in that case, it seems like it's justified to take the life of the unborn in order to save the mother. Because if we do nothing, if we actually take this position, both will die. Yeah, thought.
But it's also like they probably wouldn't refer to it as like taking the life of like a child, it's like because of like the Hippocratic oath, right? Like
Right, do no harm. Yeah.
right, so it wouldn't be more of like the mindset that I've heard from a lot of doctors is more just like we try our best to do
Right.
what we can for both patients, and they see it as two kind of like patients.
Right. So the intention is if we could, we would save both lives. The problem is we don't have the technology right now to save both lives. So you are technically taking the life of the unborn entity in this case, the unborn child. but it would be justified. So we have cases. Have you ever seen conjoined twins that are birthed? They share a body, but, or at least apart. Sometimes they're conjoined in the head. There might be other areas. In some of those cases, we know that the twins will die if they continue to grow. And so there's an emergency operation that they perform on the twins. And they recognize when performing the operation, one of them, even potentially both of them, could die. But they know both of them will die if they don't do anything. So in that case, the intention is to save both lives, but in some cases they can't, right? So in the case of a tubal pregnancy, we know both will die if we do nothing. But that's why it seems appropriate, as Ezra said, to take the life of the unborn at that point, because it saves the life of the mother, right? Those who are in the number one position here would say, even in that case, we shouldn't do it. So that's why there is this second position. Is it ever justified to take the life of the unborn? It's a qualified no. There are, in most all cases, we shouldn't take the life of the unborn, but there are a few cases, maybe 2 or 3, where it's morally justified to do so. One would be a tubal pregnancy. Another case may be when the mother we have cases where the mother contracts cancer. And would it be justified for her to undergo treatment for the cancer? And usually what happens, if you undergo treatment, it will kill the embryo or the developing fetus in that case. I think, I would tend to lean on position 2. I think there are a couple of cases where it's justified to take the life of the unborn. But it's only a couple of different cases. I think the mother doesn't have a duty if she contracts cancer. She could undergo treatment and it may kill the unborn. In a lot of the cases that we have, if the mother is pro-life, they tend not to take the treatment, try to give birth to the child, and then they're willing to accept the consequences of the cancer. But I don't think they have a duty to do that necessarily. So there may be 2 or 3 instances in this case on number 2 where it's a qualified no. There's a few cases where it seems justified that we can take the life of the unborn, but in most all cases, it's no. Yeah.
I've heard like a fair amount of Christians say that like it's okay to have an abortion if it's like the case of like rape.
Right.
And, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so that will be, okay, we can address that right now. In the case of rape, I'm just curious what would be your response to that? And if you don't have one, that's fine. It's a difficult case.
I mean, what I always said is like it's still life, even though the circumstances are horrible, and it's like it's a tragedy what
Right.
happened. But just because that tragedy happened to you doesn't mean you should take the life
Right.
of like the outcome of the tragedy, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. People are still like, well, it's awful and it's terrible. Like, why would they want the reminder always around? But I don't know. I think it's wrong, but some people are really firm there.
Yes. So there are 2 ways to approach this, and you can decide which way you think is better. What I've done in most cases is when someone raises that question to me, I will say, as a pro-life person, I'm willing to compromise and say, we can put like if it was going to law or policy, we can put in place an exemption for rape and incest. I would agree with you that it's 2 wrongs don't make a right. That would be my position, but I would be willing in policy to do that. So I will say to the person, okay, if I'm willing to compromise on that, are you willing to say that in all other cases, abortion is unjustified? And usually what they say is what? No. I say, so rape and incest really isn't the issue.
And it's only 1% of abortion.
It's a very small percentage, usually about maybe under 1%. Some have said 1.5, but it's really small. right? So I'm willing to compromise, because if you did that, how many lives would be saved? Millions, we're talking. And hey, look, we don't live in a perfect world. I think you have to be willing to make some compromises on that, because in this case, you would be saving millions of lives on the pro-life position. Does that make sense? Right? I think you could still hold the position that it's wrong and move to want to persuade people, but I think we should compromise in policy to say, no, we will make those exemptions. In fact, if you look at the state decisions that are going on right now, there's usually a provision for rape or incest. But what happens is still the pro-abortion advocates say no. So that really isn't the issue, I would say. A third position is what I would call a qualified yes. Is it ever justified to have an abortion? Many people will say yes, and it varies on how many cases. So the question I asked for a person who holds number 3 is, tell me how many cases are justified for abortion. And you get really different answers in this case. It can be rape and incest, all the way to financial burden, right? Now, my wife, you're going to hear from my wife a little bit later on from Tracy. How many people, she's a financial advisor, we're going to talk about ethics and money matters. How many people have financial burdens? Yes, she was. Everyone.
How much money they make.
It doesn't even matter how much money you make. Everyone has financial burdens. Could you imagine, and I call this the toddler analogy, if you have a toddler and you're under a financial burden, would it ever be justified to take the life of a toddler if they're a financial burden? Of course not, right? But why do we make that the case when it comes to the unborn, right? So number 3 is one of the more, I would say, popular positions to take. There's a fourth position. Again, this is like position 1. It tends to be a minority, but now it is growing. And I want you to be aware of this. This position says it's completely up to the woman, right? Or now they want to say birthing persons. The language has shifted. You were talking about gender identity issues. Some people will say that transgender men can have abortions. And that's here's what's even more
Crazy.
I will say disturbing in this case. 2 Italian philosophers have argued for what they call for afterbirth abortion. They say all the reasons that number 3 gives for abortion can be applied to newborns. So there is now a move, and it's gaining steam, to where if you birth a child, and the child doesn't have to have a deformity or Down syndrome or something along these lines, you can be justified in what we used to call infanticide, for some argue for up to 18 months. Think about that. Over a year old, right? So I told you many times, I'm not trying to be sensational, but you need to know that this is where the debate is moving towards, right? And it's called afterbirth abortion. Now, number 2 and number 3 is what we call the squishy middle. The squishy middle. About anywhere between 70 and 80% of people fall in the category of 2 and 3. The rest fall into 1 and 4. And what happens is, and you can see this with various surveys, is that people shift in their position from 2 and 3 back and forth, depending upon the issue. So I think our job, it's really difficult to persuade people who are in number 1 or number 4 positions, because like you were saying, they kind of dig in their heels on the issue. But this squishy middle, I think, is really, really important. That's where we can really can make a difference on this issue. But you have to approach it appropriately. And that's why I use this question, is it ever justified to take the life of the unborn? And then I want to get clarity and hear what a person says in that situation. And then I have something to work with. Does that make sense to you? Right? So it's a question that doesn't necessarily put people on the defensive, right? It doesn't force them to say, I'm pro-life or pro-abortion. You just say, well, what are the cases that fit, that are justified to take the life of the unborn? Now, I mentioned this with you yesterday on the problem of evil, but I think we need to remember that this moral issue has intellectual side to it, but it also has an emotional side to it, obviously, right? And we kind of have to weigh or make a judgment on when a person is wrestling with it, are they more on the emotional side or more on the intellectual side? Is it a matter of kind of factual data, or have they been hurt, or they know someone who's undergone a crisis pregnancy perhaps? Maybe it is rape and incest. That usually moves people towards a certain kind of compassion, but it may be a misdirected compassion. So what I want to kind of show you is that this issue is psychologically complex, but it's not morally complex. What you hear in the media is that this is a complex issue. It's morally complex. But remember the questions I asked at the beginning? Can I play with this? Can I eat this? Can I kill this? That really clarifies the issue. And if you can take people through those steps, what happens is then they feel the weight of the issue. So it is psychologically complex. And that's why I want to deal with people very, very sensitively on this. However, the questions I'm raising here are not morally complex. If I can show you that the unborn are part of the human community, then you need to have really good reasons to justify taking their life. Right? Are you with me on that, or does that make sense to you? If I can show, and usually what I'll tell someone who's an advocate of abortion, I will say, if I can demonstrate that someone is truly human, would you agree with me that you need really good reasons to take their life? And the answer is yes. It's very interesting. Like, talk about capital punishment. It's very, very interesting that abortion advocates are against capital punishment. Isn't that interesting? But they're willing to take a human life at the other end of the life spectrum. Think about that. Here's a clarifying question. You see signs regularly. You will see hold up at rallies, and that it says this: the right to choose. But think about this. Is there a right to choose? It's not a rhetorical question. Is there a right to choose? Well, what do you have to answer? What are you choosing? Is there a right to choose your spouse? Yes, of course. I'm for a woman's right to choose their spouse. Is there a right to choose the type of car you drive? Yep. Yeah? I think so. Is there a right to choose to beat your toddler? Of course not, right? You have to fill in the blank. I saw this car once. What does it say on the left? What does it say on the right? Right? So they're pro-choice in killing the unborn, But when it comes to animals, they're what? Pro-life. Now, I waited to talk to the person. I wanted to see, I'm like, do you understand the contradiction that you have on your car? I don't think they've ever thought about it at all. It's really, I don't think people really think about this. You have to ask the question like we did before. If there's a right to choose, what are you choosing? Question.
Did you talk to the person?
They didn't come out.
Never.
Well, I mean, I didn't wait forever.
It takes us a long time to go anywhere.
Yeah. I walked out of the Pete's Coffee in Pasadena, and there was a bumper sticker on a car that said "Challenge Everything," and I pulled out my Sharpie, and I crossed it out, and I said, "I challenge that." No, I'm kidding. I didn't do that. You guys are like, but again, I waited for the person to come out because I wanted to ask them. I'm like, challenge everything? What if I challenge that? Does anyone play video games? Yeah, you know what EA Games is?
Yeah.
Electronic Arts. They used to have a phrase. I had my two younger sons. The phrase would come up at the beginning of the game. It said, EA Games, challenge everything. And I would pause. And I would say, all right, boys, what do we think of that phrase? And they said, Dad, can we just play the game? And I said, no, think about that phrase, challenge everything. I said, what if we challenge that? That phrase needs to be challenged. So, Dad, can we just play the game? Right? So I'm like, okay, we'll just play the game. And then a few days later, I heard in the background, they were going to play the game. They said, EA, I could hear it. EA Games, challenge everything. And both of them stand up and they go, yeah, challenge that. And they got it. Right? Yeah, so as a philosopher, I trained my kids. I always said, I have a college fund for you, but I also have a therapy fund. And so you can decide which one you want to use at the end of the day. But I think they got it. Is there a right to choose? I don't think so. You have to decide what you're choosing. So the right to choose, you should help people realize this, is an incomplete right. There is no such thing. You have to fill in the blank, right? So we need to think really carefully about some of these phrases. All right, I'm going to give you an argument. Take a picture of it, whatever you can, but this is a sound argument for the pro-life position. Premise 1, the unborn entity from the moment of conception on is a full-fledged member of the human community. Premise 2, it is prima facie, that is self-evident or intuitively evident, it's morally wrong to kill a member of the human community without proper justification. Would you agree? Yeah. Premise 3, every successful abortion kills an unborn entity, a full-fledged member of the human community. Conclusion? Therefore, every successful abortion is morally wrong on the surface. Right? I gave a couple of cases to where it could be justified. Now, this argument is a sound argument. Where do you think people will disagree with this argument?
That they're a full-fledged member of the human community.
Yeah. So what would someone say to deny premise 1? I deny that they're a full-fledged member. And then I want to ask what question? Well, yeah, what is it? Remember the original question? Well, what is it? What are we talking about here? Why do you think that the unborn are not human beings? What do you think people say? Or what do you hear?
They're just a clump of cells.
They're just a clump of cells. Do you know that you, right here, sitting here, are what? A clump of cells. So that doesn't work.
They also say they have no conscience.
Yes. So the main move right now is to actually say that they are a human being, but they're not a person. And so what you have is the death of human rights and then a movement towards person rights. And you have to be careful of this because that's where the debate is right now. Right?
I was just like clarify that more.
Yeah. So, and this will be one of the arguments I bring up. The evidence scientifically seems to be so clear now that the unborn entity is a human being, right? So what abortion advocates have said is that we agree that it is a human being. However, it's not human beings who have rights, it is persons who have rights. And then you say, okay, well, what are persons? Persons, and you were alluding to it, Maria, persons are people who can have, they are self-aware, they can have an idea of their future, right? They can have plans for the future, and they have certain functionality. Those are the basic three criteria. They're self-aware, they can have plans for the future. Yeah.
So then someone with, like, for example, severe autism or Down syndrome or a mental or physical disability, would they not be considered persons?
No. So I don't know if you know this. In Iceland, they've effectively have removed Down syndrome. So almost no babies are born anymore in Iceland with Down syndrome. Why? Because they're aborted. So you can have a prenatal examination, and if you find out that your unborn baby has Down syndrome, which we can know now, what they do is they encourage abortion. So if you go, you can just Google it, you can find it. Iceland has effectively eliminated Down syndrome. Does anyone know a family or a person that has Down syndrome? Tell me about them. Are they happy?
Oh, yeah.
Notice how
They're
quickly
always smiling.
they're always smiling, right?
They're like the happiest people alive.
If you look at the literature, what it says is that it is in the best interest of the unborn to end their life. I have the article, I can show it to you, right? So you have to understand that this is where the culture is moving. And if we're going to be advocates for the oppressed, we have to get skilled at addressing the issue. It's our responsibility to be effective at it. Down syndrome people are amazing people. I wish you could have my position when I asked you, are they happy? Every single one of you had raised your hand that you know them. You're like, yes, they're happy. But even if they weren't like completely happy, should we end the lives of depressed people? No. But that is actually the reasoning that is being used to end the unborn life, is that they could become depressed. It's a life not worth living. The last time we heard that language was during the Second World War of the Nazis about the Jews. It's very, very dangerous. Jerome Lejeune, who's a very, very famous pediatrician and geneticist, says this now. He says, to accept the fact that after fertilization has taken place, a new human has come into being is no longer a matter of opinion. He says, the human nature of the human being from conception to old age is not metaphysical speculation. It is plain experimental evidence. This is why the debate has shifted from talking about human beings to talking about persons. Now, it's interesting that Christians can actually make this distinction. Would angels be persons? Yeah, they're angelic. I think you can qualify. They seem to be persons. They have self-consciousness. They can communicate, right? Is God a person? Well, God is tripersonal, right? This language of personhood actually comes in to the culture through the Christian tradition in talking about the Trinity. So you can make a distinction between persons and humans, but I would argue that every human being is a person, even though not every person is a human being. Does that make sense to you? We can actually make that distinction, but I would disagree that you can separate personhood from human being. Every human is a person. Okay? How many of you have heard of embryoscopy? The little? Okay. So when I first was teaching this, over 20 years ago, I used to teach a number of nurses and people who were going into the medical profession. And they had no idea about this evidence in this procedure. We can take a live fiber optic camera, and this is not a sonogram or what's the other word? Ultrasound. This is a live video, essentially, recording. We can see development from conception on. So what I'm going to show you comes from the Endowment of Human Development. And what you're going to see is a live recording of a developing fetus, human person, at about 4 weeks. I hope this works. That's how small it is at 4 weeks.
By 4 weeks, the clear amnion surrounds the embryo in a fluid-filled sac. This sterile liquid, called amniotic fluid, provides the embryo with protection from injury. The heart typically beats about 113 times per minute. Note how the heart changes colour as blood enters and leaves its chambers with each beat. The heart will beat approximately 54 million times before birth and over 3.2 billion times over the course of an 80-year lifespan. Rapid brain growth is evidenced by the changing appearance of the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Upper and lower limb development begins with the appearance of the limb buds by 4 weeks. The skin is transparent at this point because it is only 1 cell thick. As the skin thickens, it will lose this transparency, which means that we will only be able to watch internal organs develop for about another month.
Is that amazing? So most women don't even know that they're pregnant at this stage.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I didn't even know.
When Tracy was pregnant with our first son, Trey, she went to the doctor and got a pregnancy test, and then they told her that she wasn't pregnant. And we're about, 5-6 years into the marriage, our marriage, and we were kind of bummed because we were wanting to have kids then, and so we went, and then she was feeling sick. And so you went back to the doctor, right? And they said, well, of course you're sick, you're pregnant. She said, what? They read the wrong chart. And she was actually pregnant, right? And that was about, 8 weeks? Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, 7 weeks. So it's amazing, and this is why you have what's called heartbeat legislation now, is because we have so much scientific evidence of the humanity of the unborn. It's become overwhelming. But it's interesting that none of you have heard of embryoscopy before. But you should know. It is amazing to watch the human development. We can actually tell now of the unborn when they're right-handed or left-handed during the second trimester. You can, yeah.
Are those available on YouTube?
Yes, you can go to ehd.org, Endowment for Human Development, and you can watch all their videos. Yes.
How do you tell if a baby's right-handed or left-handed?
They actually can see how they suck their thumb in the womb. It's really cute. Right now, doctors are performing surgeries on unborn babies at 22 weeks.
22 weeks is when they can survive.
Yeah, just about between 22 and 24 weeks you can survive outside the womb. But they're actually correcting different issues of deformity while the baby is in the womb. And what they do is they open up the woman's stomach, they go into the uterus, and they actually pull out the baby, they operate on it, put it back in, sew her up, and give birth. This happened the first time in the 90s, and I think the first baby, his name is Samuel, who I think he's about 32 now. His life was saved while in what they call in utero, and you can read about his story online. It's absolutely amazing. And now, I don't want to say that it's just commonplace, but we're able to do those surgeries now almost on a routine basis. It's pretty amazing. Yet, you could walk down the street and abort the same baby. Pretty wild. I'm going to leave you with this, and then we can ask any questions that we want to do. This is easy for you to memorize, and you can use this with anyone that you dialogue with. A question that I'll ask is, what's the difference between the unborn human organism and the born human organism? I don't mean the born identity or the born supremacy. I mean the unborn. So you can do what's called the SLED test, right? SLED. So we have the unborn entity and we have the born entity. What are the relevant differences, and do they justify ending the unborn's life? Here they are. S stands for size. Are the unborn smaller than the born? Yes. Does that justify taking anyone's life? No. Shaq is bigger than my son, especially when he was 4. Does that justify any kind of taking of life? Of course not. It's obvious. Yet, you can find billboards in certain states that talk about it's small, therefore it has no rights. I can show you the billboards. Number 2 stands for, L stands for level of development. Are the unborn less developed than the born?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But so is a toddler and a teenager. Does that justify ending a life? No, we don't use that. E stands for environment. Are the unborn in a different environment than the born? Absolutely. But what does a change in location have to do with justifying someone's death? Nothing. Just because I take you to the space shuttle or to to Mars, does it mean I can kill you? Of course not. That's silly. D stands for degree of dependency. Are the unborn more dependent than the born? Absolutely. But a toddler is dependent too. An infant is dependent.
Senior citizens are dependent.
Boy, yeah, I was just going there. Tracy and I were our parents are aging. They're in their 80s, getting close to 90, and we're having to take care of them a lot. And they're becoming very, very dependent. Right? Just because you're dependent doesn't mean or doesn't justify taking the life. I'm going to just end with this. Abortion advocates will say, I agree the unborn entity is human, but it's not a person with rights. We don't want to allow people to make that move anymore. We have to say the unborn are not potential human persons. They're human persons with great potential. The unborn are not potential human persons. They're human persons with great potential. That's a big difference. Questions? I'm going to stop there just for time's sake. Comments or questions on this, or raise other arguments that people might have, or questions that you might have on this issue. Yeah.
Could you forward hit on this a little bit, but like, there's just kind of videos going around of people being like, the fetus or whatever it's like actually a parasite because it's like sucking the life out of the mom.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so ridiculous, but like, how do you like respond to that, especially in like a kind way and not be like yours?
Yeah, yeah. I think what you want to say there is say, do parasites live off their host? Yes. Do unborn babies live off their host, if you want to put it that way? Yes, but that's the natural place for the unborn. Show me any other human being who's developed in a different way. This is just, whether you say it's from nature or God, this is the way people grow. And you can't label the unborn a parasite. Actually, what mothers are, you've heard of Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Mothers are guardians of life. That's a great title. And so the unborn, that's their natural home. What other parasites can be invasive. They have a different. We can tell the different purposes of parasites. But the unborn, that's their natural home. And so you're mislabeling, you're miscategorizing what that entity is. Does that make sense? Is that responsive? It's a great question. Judith Jarvis Thompson raised this way back in 1972, I think. So that argument has been around for quite some time. Have you ever heard it's my body, so it's my choice? What would you say to that? Huh? Well, it is her body. Right. There's not one body present. How many are there? Two. And or more if you have twins, right? We've had up to, one woman went to the fertility clinic and they gave her drugs that help basically move eggs out, and she wasn't supposed to, but she ended up having sex with her husband, and she had octuplets, eight babies. It was octomom. Yeah, you can look up how the babies are doing, now they're grown in that. So yeah, it's not just one body; it can be multiple bodies. So the argument, it's my body, it's my choice, is really a misunderstanding of science, right? And I really enjoy showing people the embryoscopy video because we're such a visual culture. That really humanizes the unborn. I think that's something that we need to do, is humanize the unborn. Because you were right earlier when you said that people use the term fetus, and they use that as a placeholder to make it ambiguous what it is. And we just simply know scientifically that it's a human being now. Yeah.
I think it's also a valid argument with the my body, my choice thing is like, technically speaking, you have the choice to do anything you want, but it doesn't mean that it's the right choice. Like, technically speaking, you have the choice to murder.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's the right choice. You have the choice to really do anything, but morally it doesn't mean it's the right choice.
Yes, so that goes back to what I said about being pro-choice. That's an incomplete right. You are correct that we have the power to choose. The question that human beings have is, when I choose, am I choosing something that's morally justified? Right? So you're right, I have the power to choose. I mean, and I don't mean to be harsh with this, but you have the choice to end your life. We call that suicide. But is that morally justified? And I would say no. Right? So I think it's a right observation. We can say, yes, people have free will, they have choice. That's why I say I'm pro-choice when it comes to women choosing their spouse, when it comes to what car you drive, when it comes to buying X or Y. So I'm pro-choice on a lot of things, but there are some things that you choose that are unjustified. So I'm not pro-choice for everything. Right? That's a good question. Any others? Yeah. It is a common reason that people give. And what I would do is either use the SLED test, or I would say it's what's called bringing out the toddler. Use the toddler analogy. If a toddler or an infant is a financial burden, are you justified in ending its life? Most people have an intuition where they would say, no, of course not. Well, then why would you do that for the unborn human being? And then that response, usually then what you get is, well, it's not a human being, or it's not a person. And then you need to get into the discussion. Well, scientifically, it is a human being. Can I show you some of the reasons why we know it's a human being? You can use the embryoscopy. You can use the SLED test. There's a number of evidences that you can provide. If they're sophisticated on this issue, they will try to make the divide on that. Yes, it is a human being, but it's not a person. And then we have to be a little bit more skilled in showing that you can't separate personhood from human being. There are persons who are not humans. I think God is a person, tri-person. Angels could be. An alien could be a person. But human beings are persons with great potential, not potential persons. And I would try to have a discussion on that. Is that responsive to what you were asking?
Yeah, I'm just like wondering, like, if someone was provided resources, would they not pay an abortion in most cases?
Yeah, I think this is where actually the pro-life movement has done a lot of good, and we actually did this at my church as well, is that I think we do need to, even though I think it's a irrational argument, it doesn't hold up, the financial burden argument, but I think it's emotionally appealing, and I think pro-life advocates should be very sensitive and very willing to help crisis pregnancies or women who are in situations where there's a father who has abandoned them, to support them with financial resources. So crisis pregnancy centers, there's a number of different ministries that do that. A number of churches have what they call a benevolence fund, where they have money set aside to help a mother who is in that position, to give them financial resources. So I think we should be sacrificial in providing that, even though I think the argument is unjustified. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's where we can do a lot of good, is providing financial assistance in those situations. It removes that, yeah.
Your point is great because, I mean, it's oftentimes kind of a smokescreen. Like, that's just their initial thought, but then they haven't followed through. So like your question, well, if you had unlimited funds, would you still abort the baby? You're kind of calling them out on the smokescreen. It's not a bad thing.
Well, I said to one person, I think it was at the gym actually, we got into a discussion about abortion, and I chose a different route. I said, they asked me, are you pro-life, pro-abortion? I said, I'm very much pro-abortion. And they said, oh yeah, so am I. And I said, yeah, I'm for every abortion that results in the life of the unborn. You got it. That's exactly what they did. They went, what? I said, I'm for every abortion that results in a living life of the unborn. They're like, yeah. They actually said to me, they go, yeah, but abortion ends the life. And I said, yeah. They go, oh, it ends the life of the unborn. They didn't make the connection.
That's funny.
It's actually really interesting how people just don't think through the issue. And so I've been saying this to people. I'm completely pro-abortion if it results in the in the ongoing life of the unborn. And then it forces them to say, no, I want to end that life. Now we're really talking about the issue. Now you're really grappling with what's going on. Right? All right. Let's take a 15-minute break. I think you're going to enjoy the next session as we finish up. Stretch, get the blood flowing. And you're going to hear from Tracy next on money.
I was looking at how small far away it was. I'm like, so I went in and
A large.